Hey H3A, and today I want to share with you Motemancer. Now, what is this game? This is an indie game made by, as I understand it, a single developer, and it is best described as Factorio but with magic. The game actually is really promising, I think, though, because it is really clever on how it uses the magical theme to set itself apart from other factory games. There will be no mining copper, iron, and coal in the first few minutes of this game, for example. Now, just to be clear, this is not a sponsored video, and I am playing a pre-release build. The game is coming out in about 2 weeks from now, and there's clearly some work to be done, and it will be releasing into early access, so there will be work done after that as well. So, what I would suggest is, first of all, watch this video, like and subscribe if you haven't done so, and then try the demo for yourself. It's already out, it's free. If this looks interesting to you at all, try it out for yourself. Then follow the progress of this game and decide when and if you are going to get into the early access once it comes out, or if you just wait it out and wait for the full release. In this game, we're playing this little magician over here that can run around and pick up stuff from the ground, and this is basically the equivalent of mining your own resources. We came through a portal. There's a little bit of a story, but it's not really that detailed. So the basic idea is we came through the portal. In order to get back through the portal, we'll need to restore this land into its full glory. You might be a little worried about this contamination that is on the floor here, but this is just, it's not even going to kill you. It is just draining your energy, and yeah, basically, we need to get rid of this before we can get through the portal, which is our main objective in this first level. There's no enemies in the game, so you can actually just chill out and play and mine some resources, and the main thing you want to do is find zones like this, because this is where our resources will be auto-mined from. Now you can see I am mining some water motes right now. This is one of the magical elements that we'll be working with, but if we go to a different zone, you can see this stuff on the floor is green over here, we're getting motes of life. So there's different elements, and this is where one of the magical themes comes in, because this is what we're going to be using as resource. So not copper, coal, etc. I mean, nothing wrong with that per se, but that's been like the last 10 games you probably played in terms of factory games. It's the same principle, it's just a little bit of a twist to that, but the magical theme gets way more interesting than that. We'll get to that in a moment, but just like in pretty much every other factory game out there, you can handcraft stuff. You can see we're making salt and ether in this case, and you can make these from different types of materials. You can see we have different modes of earth, life, and water over here, and of course this is going to be expanded upon as we get more technology going. We can of course automate this collection of resources by making simple collectors. These are our miners basically, and grindstones, which we can then use to get those basic resources and make them into these more complex materials. Oh, and before I forget, I want to get one thing out of the way. I've seen some people commenting on this game like it looks like a mobile game or something, and that's probably due to the art style, but I have no idea what they're talking about. Honestly, not every game has to look as bleak and grim as Captain of Industry and Factorio and things like that. Yes, this is nice and colorful and fluffy, but it plays pretty much the same as any other factory game out there. Anyway, let's automate some stuff. We have a simple collector over here that we need to place on a mote field in order to collect the resources automatically. Now, the most important thing to note here is that we are not on a square grid. We're on a hex grid, which I actually think makes a lot of sense for games like this, but for some reason most of the games use a square grid. Now, nothing wrong with that per se, but if you're not used to thinking in hexes, this is actually quite different from what you're probably going to be used to. Now you can also see the little yellow box that is where the items are going to come out. So what I can do, for example, is something like this. Place this down and then place another building next to it. This is a grindstone, which is going to make those basic resources into more complex things. You can see the recipes that you can use right in the building there by itself. However, this is not powered. How do we power things in this game? Well, we put a mana flare next to it. Yes, we are using magic to power our buildings. Now, this little blob over here reminds me of a pylon from the Protoss out of StarCraft, if that rings any bells to you. I have been thinking we need additional pylons for about 1,000 times while playing this game. But anyway, Most importantly, these things will be running out. So you can place as many of these as you want, so we have infinite power, so to say. But as you can see, there's already a little bit of power draining from this globe, and then once it's completely dried out, this will stop working and we have to refill it. We can actually actively refill it whenever we want. If I click on it, look, it's already refilled now. But you need to keep doing that. The balance is pretty nice. It doesn't run out too fast, it doesn't run out too slow. You definitely want to upgrade to more advanced power production later on, but initially this works just fine. The nice thing about a hex grid is that you can make nice little layouts like this, all centered around a center mana flare, powering all these buildings at the same get-go. So now this is of course going to drain faster, but I am mass producing ether now. As you can see, I can pick up loads of this stuff from over here, and it's a nice and tight little looking facility. Of course, we don't just need ether, we need salt as well. So I am going to make a very similar layout over here. I just need to make sure I take into consideration where the building is facing. So I need to do something like that, for example, and then I need to make another 2 of these. Well, let's do that right here. Handcrafting is not really a problem. As you can see, it goes fairly fast, but we do definitely want to automate something later on. Yeah, you just need to get a little bit used to the orientation on a hex grid. But there we go, now we have a very similar setup and we can just mass grab salt as well. Now, of course, this is a very basic production setup, so what we want to do is some science, or at least research in this case, because we are doing that with magic once again. We're going to build an altar, and we're going to be putting pedestals next to that altar in order to get resources into that. Again, the altar needs to be powered, so putting a little mana flare next to that. And then if you want to know what you need to feed in, well, the game is already telling us we need to put in some ether and some salt prisms. This is an advanced version of the salt that we were producing before. Now, I can just put it into the building. That doesn't work, but I can put it on the altar. Now, you can either do that straight from the altar that you just saw, or I can just click on the pedestal and put it in manually. Now, if I do that, it will get absorbed. Look at that animation, I really like that. Into the altar. And we are now starting our first research. Now, once this pops in, we'll get a pop-up and we have a research unlocked. Now, we can check out our research tree, and the interesting thing is there's multiple directions in which you can go. Makes sense to first go into the logistics direction, because that will give us access to things like grabbers, slabs, which is basically belts, as well as more advanced production things. But there's also other upgrades that we can get later on. We'll get to that in a moment, but the fact that you have different options in which to progress, and you will get more and more of those later on, is a very interesting twist to this particular game. Okay, so I put in manually a couple of those items, and now we can unlock the simple logistics. That means we can make a couple of new things. First of all, we can make these simple grippers. These are things to move stuff from A to B. They work exactly like you think they will, moving things from buildings to belts and vice versa. We also have simple chests, again, exactly what you would expect. You can store some items in there, which gives us all the things we need for the first basic automation. For example, what we can do now is put a couple of boxes like this and put a couple of grippers, like, not like that apparently, because once again I even messed up the hex grid now. So let me do that correctly. Angles, and I misclicked there. There we go. This should work. We once again need to power the gripper, so we're going to put a mana flare over here. Now, if I put, say, salt prisms in this box and some ether in this box, probably not everything. There you go. Now we have automated, at least semi-automated, our first technology. The technology will keep working. I can start running around collecting more resource. Now, of course, we can do some automation here as well. For example, over here, we are making some salt. So what I could do is put one of those grippers over here, put another mana flare over there, and voila, now I'm getting a lot of salt deposited in this box. There's a maximum output that you can have. You can only have 1 stack of output in a building, but there can be 6 stacks in a chest, so just to make sure that we're stacking up on the resources. However, I can now unlock my slabs, which means we can be making belts, and that is quite useful considering we have production buildings sitting on top of resources now, and that's not really what we want. Instead, what we can do is we can replace the grindstones with more of these simple collectors and have 6 of those in all situated on top of resources now. Put a belt of slabs, I should say, on top of these. And then make a layout that looks something like, for example, this. Let's try to make it look pretty and a little bit oriented nicely. Something, no, not like that. You rotate that like so. And let's put a chest and then another nice central mana flare. There we go, and we're getting it right off the belt into the grindstone and back into the chest. Just in case you're wondering, the game currently doesn't show production speeds and things like that, but I've been talking to the developer and I've seen concepts already of that being included in the game, so it's definitely coming by the time you're playing this. Something that is already in the game, however, is a nice toggle that you can use to see what a building is producing and what is in the building, even if there's multiple items in a building. For example, this chest over here has some grippers and some other stuff in it. You can easily tell, so that is a nice quality of life feature. With that basic production up, I can start working on some more advanced production as well, just to make sure I don't need to handcraft everything. I've been doing that in the background, but of course you should not be doing that if you can help yourself. I do need some more slabs though, so let's make sure we produce some of those. Maybe some of this other stuff as well. But anyway, what we need to do is bring some ether and some salt together to make, honestly, quite a few things. Let's see, I keep building my belts in the wrong direction. I'm not sure if that's just me or if that is something that the game is doing to confuse me, but it's probably the former. Now, let's see. How do I actually get stuff into this building now? I don't, so I need to move this belt up. Hold on. Okay, something like this. So all I need to do now is place a couple of mana flares here and, for example, here. And then we should see all of these resources flowing into this building, and it starts to auto-produce the salt prisms, which is the slightly more advanced stuff I need to make pretty much everything else. And this also means we can actively start working towards some more research. Now, we don't need to self-craft all the buildings if I want. I can also do something similar to, for example, this. Just a very basic setup with a single mana flare. And then if I say want to produce, I don't know, some of these grindstones, I can just click on here and it will automatically add the resources to the building if I have them. So let me actually grab some salt prisms so I can show you. Let me clear this out. So I want some grindstones. I can just click this a couple of times and it will start auto-producing that, and I can do some other stuff and later go back and pick that up. I've also now got enough research to unlock the Tinkerer's Table, which is going to unlock, well, the Tinkerer's Table, which is a production building that is going to be able to make some more advanced things for us. Which is similar to before. I can either just place down in the middle of nowhere or try to automate that. I honestly don't think there's much reason to really automate a lot of this stuff early on at least. But as you can see, we can now very easily start making some additional slabs. Which is great because we actually need several of these buildings for the next technologies as well. So you can see if I want to go for the underground slab, which is basically a way to have our belts cross each other, we are going to not just need self-prisms and ether anymore, but we're also going to need shifting slabs. If we want to go down in the technology tree towards the salt sanctuary, we're not going to need those 3 items as well, but we're also going to need to add simple grippers to that. And more importantly, we're going to need 50 of each. So this is actually quite a bit of a step up in terms of the amount of things we need in order to unlock a technology. And doing that 50 times is going to take a little while, but there's nothing stopping us from having multiple research platforms at the same time. As you can see now over here, I am progressing on 2 different technologies at the same time. And right now I can only progress on 2 at the same time, but you're going to see this is going to get worse or better, depending on your point of view, I guess, a lot as we progress further down or up these technology trees. The Salt Sanctuary that we just unlocked, I'm not entirely sure is super useful at this point. I can make some Nitor, which is going to illuminate my surroundings with a pure glow. I'm not sure what the use of that is. We can also make Swift Stone, which is a way to make a path for ourselves, but we're not walking around that much just yet. And then there's some more advanced stuff we can't make yet. So we're probably going to use that in the future. However, for the moment, what is more important is that behind that technology, there is the Radiant Flare. That is going to increase the range of the mana flare by 1. That just makes it easier to power everything, and the requirements are the same. After that, we get some technology to restore the portal, but again, I think that includes some recipes that we don't have access to yet. However, more importantly, we can now also unlock the Elemental Binder. This Elemental Binder, and again, this is a beautiful building in my opinion, is going to allow us to combine different elements together to make more powerful versions of the different elements as well. This is going to be needed, of course, to progress in the next part of the technology tree, specifically into the life part of the technology tree. And at this point, you'll see that the technology tree is going to start branching into different types of elements that you need to master one by one. You can see at some point will be a life adapt, and that's kind of like the next phase of the technology tree. I'm going to show you more than that, but just to kind of give you a hint of how this works. By the way, we unlocked not just the elemental binary, but now also the option to start researching the extended flare. So that means that our flares, once we research this, are going to last 50% longer. So between the 50% longer and the increased range, it is going to make powering our buildings a lot less tedious. Alright, so with that other technology for the Tree of Life now on its way, which is actually going to allow us to produce power automatically, so that's going to be awesome. This is starting to look like an actual factory, and this is very much just the beginning of the game, so don't be too afraid if you think this looks small time, because it is definitely going to scale up, but we don't want to do that with without automated power, I should say, because that's obviously going to be a pain. Which brings me to the Tree of Life technology, which is going to allow us to make mana cultivators and mana roots. This will allow me to make mana cultivators, which you can hook up to one of these simple production units to make some life, and then that life is being turned into actual power. Assuming, of course, I kickstart it for a moment, so let me do that. There we go. This should start producing. Now this is going to be supplied with life, and it's going to generate power. Now the nice thing is, once this is up and running, I should be able to just remove this. This is actually generating power, which is generating more life, which is generating more power, and so on. So this should keep working as long as these things do not run out. So, and that will take quite a while. Now the nice thing is that this is free power. It's quite a bit of power as well. You can see the amount of power being generated. The only problem is it's only supplying that power in a fairly small area. Now what I can do is use the mana roots to extend this power grid, something like this. And then, for example, now this thing will be powered by this mana root, assuming that I actually connect all of this. There seems to be a little plant in the way. It's kind of like a power cable, but then a magical version of that, which is quite nice. Now, of course, actually running a power cable to all my buildings is not trivial, especially with all these belts in the way, so there's a better solution for that as well. Which brings me to the mana bloom. This is going to be kind of like a power pylon, spreading that power across a larger region. These mana blooms are pretty huge, but at least it makes it a lot easier to, for example, if I place it over here, power up this entire thing automatically, and thereby removing the need for me to run up and down and recharge these little mana flares. And with a little bit of creativity, you can make that look something like this. As you can see, everything over here is now powered through these roots. I can completely remove all these light bulbs, or these mana flares they're called. And there you can see it is now going to be completely running forever, well, at least until these things run out. But the amount of raw material seems to be large enough for that not to be an issue anytime soon. Now I can just keep expanding my power grid like this, but there's different ways in this game to do these things as well. It really depends on what you want to do. Because, for example, now I unlock the Biorhythm Life spell. This is actually a spell I can cast myself. And if I activate this, I will have an aura around me that is actively going to charge any buildings. So it's going to power buildings around me, not the most useful, but what it also will do is recharge these mana flares. So as you can see, these are currently slowly discharging. Now if I just run around and make sure I'm in the range, all of this will automatically refuel, and all I need to do is keep my biorhythm active. It's a very easy, convenient way to make sure all those mana flares keep active. And remember, they now have 50% increased duration, 1 additional range. So compared to the first few minutes of the game, this is already way more convenient. Of course, having automated power I think is generally going to be better, but at least there's some alternatives that you can use. So far, I've only really been showing you the life tree, but there's a lot more technologies to go around. As you can see, we've barely skimmed the edges of this game so far. We have earth elements as well. These are basically going to increase things like our grippers, have extended grippers. increase our mana flare stuff. Generally speaking, there's a lot of awesome stuff in here that has more to do with logistics. This is more like have to do with power. And then we have water elemental type of magic over here as well. That's going to allow us to get better belts and stuff like that. So you're going to want all of that, but in which order you get these is completely up to you. And there we go, I hooked up everything to my power network. Am I actually producing enough power? No, I'm producing 900 while I need over 1,000. But for some reason this one is not connected. Hold on, I have 4 of these power generations over here. There we go, 1,200 generated, 1,100 consumed. So now my entire factory is running on automated power. And what I really like about this game is how beautiful it looks. Look, it's all shiny, it's all magical, but at the same time it is just like any other factory game. It has belts, it has grippers and things like that. So I guess that's not going to appeal to everyone necessarily, but I really enjoyed myself. Okay, so we're going to need earth elementals and water elementals as well, and in order to make those, it's a pretty straightforward process similar to the elemental lives where we need salt and motes of lives. It's just a combination of some of the basic resources we have, so motes of water with ether or ether with mote of earth. Now it does seem that ether is used in pretty much everything at this point, so it's probably going to be worth to use this secondary field of mote of lives to get some of that going. And maybe I should do this over here. We have a water motes over here. We have earth motes over here. And this is the patch I was just talking about. Which brings me to the problem you have with automated power. If you don't generate enough of it, everything shuts down. So you can kind of see my factory kind of blinking in and out of power issues because I am requesting more power than I'm generating and I have no way to store it. So I might have to actually deal with that, and I did just unlock a new technology, which is the leaves. This is going to be a more efficient way, I think, of producing power. Okay, there we go. I am now generating some of these leaves over here, putting those into these generators, or cultivators I should say, and these are now each producing 900 power, so that's 3 times as much as the ones that are just functioning on the modes of life. And as you can see, I am now generating way more power than I need, so this is working like intended. And once again, look at how beautiful all of this is. I'm really liking the vibes of this game. All that extra power production lets me increase my ether production now, and there we go. We have, along with some earth motes, we haven't actually used those before yet. I am making elemental earth now, and I'm just going to collect that, put it into an infuser, and start the science for, what is it? The foundation of earth. This is going to give us a reaching gripper, which is basically a 2-range gripper, similar to the things that you might see in games like Factorio. Additional reach, you can use multiple belts to feed into a single thing without having to kind of fiddle our way around buildings like I'm doing over here. I can just move these belts and make this a little bit more clean. And I want to do the same for the flow of water, because that is going to give us the streamway, which is a much faster type of belt. And here you can see some of that in action. We have grippers over here that are drawing from a secondary belt. We have actually new belts as well. We have the streamway over here that's a lot more efficient. Then we have the quarry collector that is doubling our output. I mean, all of this is pretty standard stuff for factory games. I'm just wanting to show you that this is very much a factory game, but the look and feel of it is just completely different. Look at these little roads that's helped me speed up my my movement as well. And that is honestly just scratching the surface once again. I unlocked a couple of other things in the technology tree just to show you what is going to happen. Now, there's a couple of predictable things, like, for example, the Streamway Delta and Underground Stream. That is basically the equivalent of what we were already doing with the belts, but allowing you to split things up, go underground, etc. But there's also other things like increased movement speed, the increase of the biorhythm. It says 0%, but if I activate the biorhythm now, again, this is just a pre-release build. As you can see, the radius is now much larger than it was. So if I just want to keep using mana flares, I can, and it's super easy to recharge everything as well. Down here we have some other stuff as well, like, for example, the vault allows us to store more items. Now, that's actually a nice thing to point out at this point, because I do think there are a couple of things that could be improved in this game. All of which are just quality of life things, honestly, and not as much related to the gameplay loop itself. For example, I think the inventory is a little bit on the small side considering how many different types of building and items you unlock. Now you can actually upgrade your inventory along the way, so this might not necessarily be an issue, and it's close to not being an issue for me altogether, to be honest. But I ran into issues, especially when I was trying to redesign some of my buildings, that I just had too much stuff in my inventory. Anyway, the main thing I really want to see in this game is multiple hotbars, because again, you have so many different types of buildings that being able to not put these on an actual bar is just, I don't think, particularly nice. You can access them from your inventory as well, but that's just a little bit clumsy, so being able to do that directly by means of multiple hotbars is definitely something I would hope to see implemented pretty soon. Now, other than that, there's a couple of other minor things. For example, the movement speed is a little bit on the low side, I think. Yes, there are these walkways. Actually walking along these is kind of annoying. They also interrupt your building, so yeah. Again, just small nuances, but there's some things that I think could be slightly better, just slightly fine-tuned. But then again, it might not be a problem once you actually have everything automated. Other than that, I actually think this game is really enjoyable. Let me know in the comments if you want me to play this more once it comes out in about 2 weeks from now, or if you think this is the worst game ever, then also just tell me that. Long story short, I just would like to know whether or not this game interests you and whether or not I should show more of it. I might do that anyway, because honestly, I'm kind of having fun playing this game, but let me know in the comments regardless what you think. If you're still here, you're awesome, and I do hope to catch you in the next one.